The morning of my sister's wedding, I stood in front of a full-length mirror in a bright orange dress 3 sizes too big, staring at my own reflection, and I thought, she planned this. She actually planned this. Because nobody accidentally orders a size 2XL in a color that doesn't match a single flower in the entire venue. Nobody forgets to tell their own sister what the bridesmaids are wearing until the morning of the ceremony. And nobody smiles the way Natalie smiled when she handed it to me, slow, satisfied, like she'd been waiting for that exact moment for years. But here's what Natalie didn't know. She didn't know that I had been waiting too. My name is Brooke. I'm 31 years old. I have a job I love, an apartment I'm proud of, and a sister who has spent the better part of 2 decades making sure I knew exactly where I ranked in this family. And the answer was always the same: last. Dead last. Behind Natalie, behind her comfort, behind her preferences, behind whatever version of herself she needed to protect at any given moment. The orange dress wasn't the first thing. It wasn't even close to the first thing. But it was the thing that finally made me stop asking why and start asking, what am I going to do about it? I'm going to tell you everything. From the beginning. Natalie is 4 years older than me. Growing up, that gap felt like a canyon. She was the firstborn, the one who got the bedroom with the window seat, the one whose school photos got framed first, whose art projects got hung on the refrigerator the longest. I wasn't invisible in my house, but I was second. Always second, in the quiet, unceremonious way that nobody ever has to say out loud. Our parents, Gerald and Patricia, they weren't cruel people. I want to be clear about that. They loved both of us. But Natalie had a way of occupying space that made it hard for anyone else to get a turn. She was louder, more confident, more demanding in the ways that got rewarded. She knew how to make her needs feel urgent. And somewhere along the way, my parents started treating her urgency as the default priority. I adapted. I got quieter. I got better at doing things on my own, better at not needing things, better at sitting with disappointment until it just became background noise. By the time I was in high school, the dynamic was so established that neither of my parents noticed it anymore. Natalie got the car on weekends. Natalie got the college prep tutor. When money got tight my sophomore year, it was my extracurricular activities that got quietly cut, not hers. When I asked my mom about it, she said, "Natalie's in her senior year, Brooke. This isn't the time." I never figured out when the time was going to be. Natalie met her fiancé, a man named Clifford, about 2 years ago. Clifford was perfectly fine. Steady job, nice manners, laughed at the right moments. I had no issues with Clifford. Clifford had never done anything to me. When they got engaged, I was genuinely happy for her. I mean that. I had done enough of my own work, enough therapy, enough journaling and processing to get to a place where I could feel something honest when something good happened to my sister. And this was good. She was happy. I could see that. So when she called to tell me about the engagement, I congratulated her. When she called to ask if I'd be a bridesmaid, I said yes without hesitating. When she sent me to a planning meeting 3 months out, I showed up. I sat in her living room with her 5 other bridesmaids, women I knew to varying degrees, friends of hers from college and work, and I listened to her talk about her vision. Lavender. Everything lavender. The tablecloths, the floral arrangements, the ribbon on the cake, and the dresses. She pulled up a photo on her phone, a flowy, elegant gown in a soft lilac lavender, fitted at the top, flared slightly at the bottom. Classic. Genuinely beautiful. She said she'd already ordered all 6 dresses. She had everyone's sizes. She'd handle it. I nodded. I smiled. I thought, okay, we're doing this. We're actually doing this. The rehearsal dinner was the first sign that something was off. Natalie seated the bridesmaids together at a long table near the front of the room. There were 6 place cards. My name was not among them. I found my name at a small table near the back, next to a cousin I'd met twice and an older family friend who spent most of dinner talking to the person on his other side. I told myself it was a seating chart error. Venues make mistakes. Planners miss things. But then Natalie gave a speech thanking each bridesmaid by name. There were 5 of them. She thanked her college roommate, her work best friend, her childhood neighbor, her 2 sorority sisters. Then she paused and said, "And of course my family." One collective gesture toward the back of the room. No name. No specific acknowledgement. I sat with it. Swallowed it. Told myself I was being sensitive. My mom leaned over at one point and whispered, "She's just overwhelmed, honey. You know how she gets." I did know how she got. I had been knowing how she got for 31 years. The morning of the wedding, we were all supposed to get ready together at the hotel where the bridal suite was. I arrived at 8, same as I was told. The other 5 bridesmaids were already there, already in robes, already mid-mimosa. There was a hair and makeup team working efficiently, moving from chair to chair. The lavender dresses were hanging on a rack near the closet. 5 of them. Long, beautiful, exactly what I'd seen in the photos. I looked around for mine. Natalie was sitting in the center chair getting her hair done. She met my eyes in the mirror. "Oh," she said. "Yours is in that bag." She pointed to a garment bag on the floor near the door. Not hanging. On the floor. I picked it up. Unzipped it. Bright orange. Not coral, not peach, not a warm neutral that could almost pass for something intentional. Orange. The kind of orange that screams at you. And the size tag, 2XL. I wear a medium. The room went quiet for just a second. Not a dramatic movie quiet. Just that brief pause where everyone registers something uncomfortable at the same time and collectively decides how to handle it. I looked at Natalie. "It was the only one left," she said. And she smiled. That slow, private smile. One of the other bridesmaids, a woman named Priya, looked at me with an expression that said she understood exactly what was happening and had no idea what to say about it. I said very calmly, "The only one left of what?" Natalie shrugged one shoulder. "I looked and looked, but I couldn't find your size in time. This was what was available." "Available from where?" Another shrug. "I don't remember." She turned back to the mirror. Conversation over, apparently. I stood there holding an orange dress the size of a small tent, and I made a decision. Not a loud decision. Not a dramatic one. A quiet one. The kind that settles into your chest like something finally clicking into place. I was going to put on the dress. I was going to walk down the aisle. I was going to smile in every photo. And then I was going to let everything that happened next happen completely on its own. Because the thing about the truth is that it doesn't need your help. It just needs enough time. I put on the dress. I used a safety pin I found in my purse to gather some of the fabric at the back. It didn't make it look good. It just made it look intentionally ridiculous rather than accidentally so. I held my head up. I did my makeup myself. When the wedding coordinator saw me in the hallway, she stopped walking. She looked at me, looked at the other bridesmaids behind me, looked back at me. "Is there?" she started. "Everything's fine," I said. "Let's just have a beautiful wedding." She looked like she wanted to say more. She didn't. Here's what I didn't tell anyone that day. 3 weeks before the wedding, I had run into Clifford's sister, a woman named Renata, at a grocery store. We'd met twice before, once at an engagement party, once at a family dinner, and we'd gotten along well. She was warm, funny, the kind of person who remembered specific things you mentioned in passing. She'd asked me how the wedding prep was going. I'd said fine. She'd mentioned that she was on the planning committee too and had been handling some of the logistics on Clifford's side. Then, almost as an aside, she said, "I saw the bridesmaid order. Is it weird that your dress was listed differently from the others? Like, a different style entirely." I'd gone still. "What do you mean?" "The order form," Renata said. "I saw a copy because I was coordinating with the vendor. The other 5 dresses were ordered in the lavender style, correct sizes. But the 6th one, yours, I think, was listed as a different style and size. It was ordered that way. It wasn't a mistake by the vendor." She'd watched my face. "I thought you knew." I hadn't known. But I wasn't surprised. I'd thanked her. I'd gone home. And I'd thought very carefully about what I wanted to do. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give Natalie that. The venue was draped in lavender and white. The late afternoon light came through the windows at exactly the right angle, and when Natalie walked down the aisle, she looked genuinely radiant. Clifford cried. Real tears, the kind you can't perform. Whatever happened between my sister and me, that moment was real. I stood at the end of the bridesmaid line. I was the only one not in lavender. Every single person in that room could see it. Some stared. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed on my behalf. Some looked confused. I stood straight. I kept my face neutral. I was not going to give anyone the satisfaction of watching me shrink. During the cocktail hour, 3 separate people came up to me and asked, with varying degrees of tact, what had happened with my dress. I said the same thing each time. You'd have to ask the bride. Just that. Nothing more. By the time we got to the reception, I could feel the murmur moving through the room. People were noticing. People were asking each other. The wedding photographer, a professional named Sasha who had been hired by both families, kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. And then my Aunt Rosalind found me at my table. Aunt Rosalind is my mother's older sister. She is 73 years old, has zero patience for nonsense, and has been one of the few people in my life who has always called things what they are. She sat down across from me, looked at the orange dress, looked at me and said, "She did this on purpose." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "Does your mother know?" My mother told me to stop being dramatic. Rosalind's jaw tightened. "Your mother." "I know. What are you going to do?" I took a sip of my water. "I'm going to let it play out." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, slowly. "All right." What played out started about an hour into the reception. Renata, Clifford's sister, had been watching the whole thing from across the room. I didn't know this until later. But she had seen the dress, she had remembered our conversation in the grocery store, and she had made a decision of her own. She went to Clifford. I don't know exactly what she said to him. I pieced it together later from what Clifford told me himself. Weeks after the wedding, she told him what she'd seen on the vendor order form. She told him that the dress had been ordered wrong deliberately. She told him that it might be something he'd want to know about his wife. Clifford came to find me during the reception. He was still in his suit, still had the boutonniere in his lapel. He pulled me aside near the edge of the dance floor, and he looked at me with something in his face that I hadn't expected to see, genuine distress. "Brooke," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay." "Did Natalie do this to you on purpose?" I held his gaze. "Yes." He exhaled through his nose. "I'm so sorry. You didn't do it. I know. But I'm sorry." He walked back to the head table. I watched him sit down next to Natalie. I watched his expression shift. I watched Natalie notice the shift and lean toward him. I watched the smile on her face falter. I didn't know what he said to her at the table. But I know what the rest of that reception felt like. Quieter, tighter, like a room where the air pressure had changed. In the weeks after the wedding, my parents called me twice. Both times, my mother said the same thing. I needed to apologize to Natalie for causing a scene. I want to let that sit for a second. I had stood quietly in an orange tent dress while my sister walked down the aisle in her vision of a perfect wedding. I had not said a single unkind word publicly. I had not confronted anyone at the reception. The only thing I had done was exist, visibly, in the dress my sister chose for me. And I needed to apologize. I told my mother very calmly that I would not be doing that. She told me I was making everything about myself. I told her about the vendor order form, about Renata, about the proof that the dress had been ordered deliberately. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There must be an explanation." I said, "There is. The explanation is that she did it on purpose." Another silence. "Brooke?" My mother said finally. "She's your sister." "I know who she is, Mom." I hung up gently. I sat in my apartment in the quiet that followed, and I let myself feel everything. The grief of it, the old familiar ache of being the one who gets managed instead of believed, the exhaustion of having to justify my own experience to the people who should have understood it without explanation. And then I let it go. Not in the way where I was pretending it didn't hurt. In the way where I was choosing not to carry it anymore. The real consequence came from somewhere I didn't engineer and didn't expect. Sasha, the wedding photographer, had been hired through a studio that both families had agreed on. She was professional, thorough, and, as it turned out, deeply observant. About 3 weeks after the wedding, she posted a blog entry on her photography website. It was about the emotional complexity of wedding days, the things photographers notice that no one else does. She wrote about the way a room holds tension, the way faces tell stories during formal events. She included a photo from the ceremony, me, standing at the end of the bridesmaid line in my orange dress, face calm and composed, surrounded by 5 women in lavender. She hadn't used my name. She didn't have to. The caption read, "Sometimes the most powerful image isn't the one everyone planned for." It went, to put it simply, everywhere. The comments were immediate and overwhelming. People who had never met any of us were dissecting the image, asking questions, filling in gaps. Someone found the wedding hashtag and cross-referenced the photos. Someone else found a comment Natalie had posted on her own social media comparing herself to a specific film character known for being tormented by her family, a comment that, in context, read as jarringly ironic. I was not online for any of this. My friend Tamara called me to tell me it was happening. I looked at the image once. I closed my laptop. I didn't engage. But the internet didn't need me to engage. Natalie's own followers turned. People who had celebrated her engagement, liked her engagement photos, commented on her wedding countdown posts. They were now asking questions she didn't have good answers to. Some of Clifford's family publicly commented. A cousin of his wrote a long thread that I won't repeat, but that left very little to the imagination about what people who had attended the wedding had observed. Natalie called me furious. She said I had gone to the press. I hadn't. She said I had talked to Sasha. I hadn't. She said I had orchestrated the whole thing to ruin her marriage before it even started. I listened to her for a while. Then I said, "Natalie, I put on the dress you gave me. I stood in your wedding. I didn't say anything to anyone. The only person who created this situation was you." She hung up. My parents called again. This time my father was on the line too. Gerald, who spent most of my childhood going along with whatever kept the peace. He was there, and he was quiet in a different way than usual. A thinking way. He asked me to tell him what had happened. From the beginning. I did. I told him about the dress, the vendor form, Renata's account, the seating at the rehearsal dinner, the speech that had mentioned everyone except me by name. I told him about years of it, not to pile on, not to make him feel guilty, but because he had asked and he deserved the honest answer. When I finished, there was a long silence. My father said, "I didn't know." "I know you didn't." "That's not an excuse." "No," I said. "It's not." Another silence. Then, "I'm sorry, Brooke. I should have been paying better attention." It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a dramatic apology. It was a quiet, honest moment of acknowledgement from a man who didn't do those easily. And it was enough. It was more than enough. My mother called me 2 days later separately. She did not apologize. But she stopped asking me to apologize to Natalie. Sometimes that's what a shift looks like. Not a declaration, just a stopping. Clifford and Natalie are still married. I don't know everything about how their relationship has navigated what happened, and honestly, it's not mine to know. What I do know is that Clifford reached out to me about 2 months after the wedding, through a brief text message. It said, "I want you to know that I see you. I'm glad you're part of the family. I'm sorry for what was done." I saved that message. Not out of resentment, not to use later. Just because it was kind. Because it was someone choosing to say the right thing when they didn't have to. Natalie and I haven't spoken since the call where she accused me of engineering the whole thing. That door isn't closed permanently. I've done enough work on myself to know that I'm not interested in permanent closures with people I share blood with. But it's closed right now, and I'm okay with that. What I kept from all of it was this: I didn't react. I didn't perform. I didn't plan some dramatic revenge or scheme some confrontation. I simply showed up, told the truth when asked for it directly, and let the natural weight of what Natalie had done settle onto the ground where it belonged. I didn't have to carry it. I never had to carry it. That was always her weight. The orange dress is still in my closet, actually. I haven't thrown it away. Some days I look at it and I feel a flash of that old hurt, the specific kind of hurt that comes from someone who should love you deciding to humiliate you instead. But mostly when I look at it, I feel something else. Something quieter. Something that feels a lot like being done. I'm done shrinking. I'm done apologizing for taking up the space I was given. I'm done making myself smaller so someone else can feel larger. That's not dramatic. That's just finally being honest about what I'm worth. If anything in this story felt familiar, If you've ever been the one in the wrong dress, the wrong seat, the wrong side of someone else's need to feel superior, I want you to know something. The fact that someone treated you as less than does not make you less than. It just makes them someone who couldn't afford to see you clearly. The truth doesn't need your performance. It just needs your patience. Have you ever been deliberately excluded or humiliated by someone who was supposed to have your back? What did you do? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If this story moved you, you're in the right place. Velyra Payback posts new stories every single day. Real emotions, real stakes, real payback. Subscribe so you never miss one.